Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. Joining me today is Pastor Steven Zantjer, pastor of Green Meadow Bible Baptist Church in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Thank you so much for joining us again. And we talked a little bit about the bivocational pastor in a previous episode, but we're going to change it up a little bit. Today, you preached in chapel at the college, and you preached on Proverbs chapter 5, the latter verses there. And basically, I don't want you to necessarily re-preach the sermon per se, but I thought it was very good, and I thought it was very applicable to every Christian in their life, and I thought a lot of people could be benefited by what you had to say. If you could kind of rehearse a little bit of what the background is, what does Proverbs chapter 5, verses 21, I believe?
Yes, 21 through 23.
Yeah, so what are those verses teaching us, and how can they apply to us today in our daily lives?
Okay, well, the context of that passage of Scripture, and thanks for having me back on.
Absolutely.
It's a blessing. Had fun the first time, and looking forward to the second time. Proverbs chapter 5, that context it has to do with that sin that it's talking about there. It has to do with fornication, sexual sin. Mm-hmm. And so the message I brought to chapel was to broaden that to all sins, because there's, we have sins, many sins that can become habitual that are not sexual in nature. Mm-hmm. But we made sure we highlighted and took the time to really emphasize the dangers of sexual sin. And we were talking about, I don't remember how much you heard of it, but I was talking to a fella who's affiliated with another good Bible college, and they were one of the staff members on that college said that he believes his biggest concern is that probably 90% of the men in that college are dealing with pornography daily. 90%. Now, of course, I don't know where he's getting all those statistics, but I mean, he's, I don't know if he was dean of men. I think he's dean of men or something like that. But one of the leadership in that college, and I'm not saying I don't think that's exclusive to that college. I think all of our young people are subjected to the garbage and the filth of pornography on their cell phones, on the social media. I have to keep the social media off my phone, because you can't look through Facebook or Instagram without at least some reel coming up with something inappropriate on there. And the Bible tells us we're not even supposed to allow that to go through our eye gates. We're not even supposed to look on sin. So how do we obey that precept? Anyway, well, what you're saying is absolutely true. It's pervasive, number one, in our culture. And we access the culture of today through our devices. It used to be sin, immorality you had to search it out, reach out for it. But today, we carry it with us. It's the in day and age in which we live. It is another era. And so that statistic, where I'd be liable to say it's 100%, where good grief. It probably is, right.
I mean, if you have access to internet, or you drive down the interstate and you see a billboard, you're going to be tempted. It's there. It's in your face, and it's something you're going to have to deal with. You're 100% of us are going to be tempted with it. Absolutely.
But a high percentage are yielding to that temptation.
Okay, that's what.
And that's the damage. Right. It's not just being 90% being tempted. It's 90% of people engaging, these young men engaging with this daily. Which of course is just rotting their brain, not literally, but spiritually and very practically in their walk with God. The message was simply that the sin detains you, holds on to you. Where the first part of that, the Bible talks about will be holden with the cords of his sins. So it'll detain you, and then he shall die without instruction. It'll destroy you. We know that James talks about that as well. When sin is done, it leaves death. It brings forth death. So, it's not always a quick, easy death. There's a lot of destruction sometimes before the physical death that takes place, and we see that with homes. We know many men of God, and we would have called at one point men of God, women of God, even probably, that love the Lord and have had a walk with God that was very clear, and then just sexual immorality, it can just totally destroy a household, a church. So much, and of course the devil loves that. So there's great destruction there. And then the last one was it disorients you. In that last part of verse number 23, it says, "In the greatness of his folly, he shall go astray." And I believe that we can say no to God or say no to the Holy Spirit, and so many times where he stops working on our heart, and that's like a disorientation. And I was telling the young people how scary is being disoriented. You know, you're spinning around or you don't know where you're at, lost. Sure. You know, it's a terrifying experience. I was snowmobiling with my wife one time, and we went up in Petoskey area, and we were hitting these trails, and I thought it'd be really cute to pull off the trail real quick and hide with the snowmobile, because all day I've been driving so much further ahead of her. Yeah. So I was going to drive off the trail real quick, hide behind a tree, and then when she went by me, I was going to jump back out and ride up behind her, and I tricked you. Well, that time she was actually keeping up with me, and I didn't realize. So when I pulled off the trail, she didn't see me though, and she went by. By the time I got behind a tree, hid, and shut off my motor, I couldn't hear her anymore. So I'm like, oh, what's going on? It's weird. So I was like, a couple minutes went by. I'm like, I don't hear her. So I went back up the trail.
Oh, no.
So she's still going down the trail.
Directions.
She's not good with direction. She's following me. Anyway, I turn around. Long story short, I finally catch up to her. She gets off her snowmobile, and her legs just go limp, and she's weeping.
Oh, yeah.
That scare of disorientation. Yeah. She didn't know where she was. And, of course, we make light of that now, and we joke about that now. But she was terrified, and I totally... Let's just say I never did that again. Amen.
Pay for that later, huh?
And very rarely did she ever go snowmobiling with me again, because how terrifying. That left a terrifying scar, and I put that into our spiritual life. You think about how terrifying it is to get to a place where God no longer works on your heart about sin, no longer convicts you, no longer tries to guide you. You don't have the peace of God that passes all understanding. That stuff withdraws. As Brother Hall was saying earlier, God's not gonna share you with pornography. He's not gonna share you with sexual sin or any habitual sin. You want it. Eventually he's gonna say, all right, that's you. You get disoriented, can't get back. That's a scary feeling, scary thought that it could get to that. But there's a lot of people that I think end up there.
Well, yeah, certainly any sin separates us from God, separates us from our walk with God. It separates us from our Bible reading, from our prayer life. And I know in my own personal life that when there's those types of lapses in my personal close walk with God, that it's because of sin. And that is my source of direction.
Right. Yeah.
You can easily become disoriented in your life, have a lack of priorities, get things mixed up in your life and what you're supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to be doing it when you're not daily in the Word, when you're not constantly communing with God through prayer. It really does, mess your life up.
Oh, yeah.
So,
for sure.
You had mentioned an illustration of something like that, where a young man and a young lady had got married. Could you share that with us?
It was a fellow I was just talking to not too long ago, actually, and his son-in-law, they're going through a divorce at this moment. Actually, his daughter and future son-in-law were getting ready for marriage, and everything was on track. Everything was going smoothly. They both come from Christian homes. They were keeping themselves till marriage and all of that. But he had decided to buy a house by himself before to try to get ahead of things. Well, he got up, him getting out from underneath his parental leadership and getting that alone time. He got on his phone and he started messing around with pornography, and that pornography brought such depravity in that home. I mean, right in the honeymoon, he tried to bring that into the marriage room, into the marriage bed. And then of course she didn't want to engage in that. She didn't want to mess around with that. That was something way totally foreign to her. And eventually they did have a baby, but just recently after that baby was born, it got so bad that he literally put a gun in her face, had dumped the bullets out and was clicking the gun in her face, and talking about, then I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to kill the baby, make you watch. But it all started with, he was no red flags. But the pornography, that's where it started, was dabbling with pornography. And I guarantee you could probably go back and ask him if he'd be honest. He'd probably just a click here and there, just what the world would call soft pornography, just little bits here and there until it detained him, destroyed him. Now I think he's disoriented now. I mean, he's somewhere down in Texas, I guess now. But of course, leaving all names out. But it's just a scary situation. I'm sure that's one of many stories of the end of sexual sin or any habitual sin. Really, I think that it really could go in so many different directions.
Yeah, that behavior is really erratic, and it just speaks to the effect that sin has on a person's life. It messes with you in every aspect of your life where, man, you're acting totally like a crazy man. That's weird behavior.
Right.
And it's totally preventable. You can just where you can get out from underneath of that. What suggestions do you give to somebody who's engaging in some kind of habitual sin, whether it's pornography or whatever else it might be? What can someone do to prevent that from being detained, destroyed, disoriented, whatever those steps are?
You got to get help, and that doesn't always mean, I'm not meaning secular help. I mean, you go to your pastor or your parents, peers, and you don't have to confess necessarily everything every time either, as much as trying to get somebody to hold you accountable. I'd say preventative maintenance is one of the greatest tools in this, because you can't unsee, right?
Yeah.
Those things you can't unsee, and it will still have an effect even years down the road. Those images will still pop back into your brain. And so the greatest thing is to try to get ahead of it before it even starts. And young people, shut the social media off. Or if you're going to be on it, then make sure that you get one of these programs out there. There's a couple of them out there, like Cavanaugh or something like that. I don't have that one. I don't have any of them. I just my wife has all my passwords and stuff. But put some plans into place that somebody has access to all of your stuff, or there's some of them applications will actually take pictures of your screen if something nasty gets on there and send it to your accountability partner, so that boom, hey, that holds you accountable. You'd think that just God knowing should be enough, but our flesh is wretched, it's wicked, and we're tempted to do really dumb stuff. So I'd say preventative maintenance would be great. If you're battling with it, if you're in the middle of it, get to your pastor, get to your parents if you're a young person. Yes, it's going to hurt when you confess a sin. There's going to be a moment of grief on both sides. It's not going to be a comfortable situation, but you will feel relieved once it's out in the open, and you've allowed the sunlight to cleanse that. You've allowed the light to cleanse it. It's out in the open. You allow the healing process to start, and then you put some implement some plans, some standards, some boundaries up there, so that you don't do it again. I'm convinced there's a lot of boys out there ought to have flip phones, not smartphones, because the temptation is just so great. It's very hard, and I'm not saying one's weaker than the other. I think that just God, the devil tempts us in different ways. He finds the weakness, and some guys' weakness is that, and some guys' weakness might be something else.
I've often used the analogy, imagine an alcoholic. They're trying to quit drinking,
right,
and going to AA meetings or whatever 12-step program they've got, and it'd be foolish for them in that process of trying to get away from that stuff to go visit a bar.
Exactly. Yep.
You talked about the your chaplain for fire department.
Yeah.
Can you share that story with us again? You mentioned that in chapel today.
Oh, about that. Yeah. So I was talking to some of the fellas and just trying to get to know them and really making small talk, but then asking them about their profession a little bit. And we were talking about one of the guys does also some work in the city of Kalamazoo and all the homelessness and the drug addicts and things like that, and just people laying around the streets, and just how sorry, how sad it looks, and the pain they're going through. And he was saying that, he said that statistically, if somebody's hooked on heroin and fentanyl and those drugs like that, even after they've been clean for so long, that it's 100% that they will go back to that if it's offered to them.
Wow.
100% in the statistics of the secular world says 100%. Of course, I said that's not taking account the power of Christ.
Yeah. And
so we know that God can save, that Jesus Christ can empower that one trying to get free from that addiction, and I do believe that God's people can enjoy victory over that. But in the secular world, without the Holy Spirit indwelling the believer, and just in the flesh, 100% of the time, they're going to go back to it if it's offered to them. They can be cleaned up, go through all 12 steps, be cleaned up for potentially years. If that needle's put in front of them, loaded with heroin, that they'll take it again.
And the same thing goes with any sin in the Christian life.
I really believe that. I really believe it.
You mentioned 1 Corinthians says flee fornication.
Yeah.
That implies so many
run.
That
don't mean just say no. It means run from it.
Yeah.
Get as fast as you possibly can.
That's a radical reaction.
Radical reaction, exactly.
Absolutely.
And that's it's not necessarily just a physical run as much as it is the actual action of doing that radical those radical changes in your life to get that out of your life. It might be as radical as chucking your phone. Mm-hmm. It might be as radical as having to turn that all over to somebody else to help you to get through that. Because like you said, your cell phone's there, just like the drunk trying to drive by the bar. Your cell phone's right there, and you have to use it every day.
Yeah.
You got to make some radical changes if you're going to actually enjoy some real victory. And this is what it's all about. These young men in the college that are called to preach and that we're praying for that God will use, they're not going to have the power of God in their lives, their personal lives, in their ministries, if God is having to contend with pornography and fornication and any habitual sin. And the churches depend upon men of God having the power of God, and homes. The wife is dependent on her husband, and the husband's dependent on her wife having the power of God, and the kids. I mean, it all really surrounds about that walk with God and His power in the homes and on families. It's not going to be there if they choose to continue to thumb their nose at God and say, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. It's just not going to be good. So,
well, everything you said today in chapel was wonderful, and I'm glad that we brought you on to kind of rehearse this on the podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people will receive help for that, and I pray that people will take that radical change and take those steps if necessary. So
Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It is a blessing to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And catch us on all the other episodes on our YouTube channel, and also on the audio-only platforms as well. Make sure that you leave a comment, you like each episode, you share it with a friend so that the podcast can grow and more people can be benefited from it. Thank you so much for joining us.